She walked into the wedding alone, the woman everyone whispered about, mocked and pitied. But when the billionaire CEO rose from his seat, crossed the glittering ballroom and whispered, "You're mine tonight," the laughter froze mid-air. No one understood why he'd claimed the woman they'd discarded, or what history burned quietly between them. What began as humiliation turned into a revelation that would upend every secret in that room, and prove that even ruin can ignite into power, love and vengeance. If this story left you breathless, don't just stop here. Hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next heart-stopping tale of love, power, and redemption. Your next favorite story begins right after this one. The ballroom shimmered under 1,000 lights, each chandelier spilling gold across marble floors polished to perfection. Laughter floated like perfume, light, elegant, and edged with cruelty. Every face seemed sculpted for display, every smile practiced for social warfare. The city's elite gathered to witness another union of power, not love. When Elena Hayes stepped through the doorway, the laughter shifted. Subtle, but enough for her to feel the eyes turning, the whispers rising like a tide. She walked in alone, the echo of her heels too loud in a room that thrived on silence after gossip. Her dress wasn't couture. It was simple silk, ivory against her warm skin. The kind of elegance money couldn't buy but envy couldn't ignore. They remembered. Of course they did. Everyone remembered the scandal, the engagement that dissolved overnight, the story that never stopped spreading. She had once been the fiancée of the groom's brother, the same groom now standing at the altar, pretending not to see her. She came alone? Someone whispered behind a crystal glass. She still has the nerve, another replied softly. Helena heard every word but didn't flinch. Her chin remained lifted, her face unreadable, an armor polished by humiliation and rebuilt by pride. She took her seat quietly at a corner table, the one furthest from the dance floor. Every detail around her glowed, laughter, gowns, champagne flutes, but inside everything felt muted. She wasn't there to reclaim anything. She was there to prove that she could still exist in their world, without begging for belonging. Then the doors opened again, the music softened, the crowd's collective hum fell into a hush that rippled. Through the hall like wind before a storm, Adrian Blackwell had arrived, the billionaire, CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, a name that carried more power than most titles combined. Tall, sharply dressed in a tailored black suit, his presence commanded attention, the way thunder silences conversation. People straightened unconsciously when he walked in. His expression was calm, detached, but there was something about the way he moved, deliberate, like he owned not just the room, but the air everyone breathed. Elena looked up for only a second, but it was enough. Their eyes met, a glance that lasted a heartbeat longer than it should have. The noise of the room blurred, as if every sound was swallowed by that silent recognition. That wasn't the first time he'd seen her. Years ago, in a quiet cafe, she had defended a stranger from a cruel accusation, not knowing that stranger was Adrian himself, a man hiding from his own scandal at the time. He had never forgotten her voice, calm and fierce, saying, "You don't humiliate people just because you can." He saw her now, not the gossip's victim, not the woman they mocked, but the same defiant soul from that day. And for the first time in years, his composure cracked, barely visible, but enough for those closest to him to sense the shift. The bride's laughter faltered. The groom's jaw tightened. People exchanged curious looks. What was Adrian Blackwell doing staring at her? Eleanor forced herself to look away, her pulse betraying her calm. She sipped her champagne, eyes fixed on the reflection of chandeliers instead of his gaze. But she could still feel it, heavy, focused, like heat against her skin. Conversations resumed awkwardly at first, then louder, attempts to drown out the invisible thread connecting two people on opposite sides of the room. The whispers returned, but this time tinged with uncertainty. Why is he looking at her? Maybe he knows her. Adrian doesn't know anyone. She wanted to disappear, yet some part of her, the one still aching from being underestimated, wanted to stay, to see why fate would bring him into this room tonight, at this wedding of all places. As the toasts began and laughter filled the air again, Elena felt a strange energy building. It wasn't just in her, it was in the crowd, in the rhythm of the night. Something had shifted when he arrived. The air had changed texture, charged with curiosity and something darker, unspoken. When she glanced up again, he was no longer across the room. Adrian Blackwell stood just a few tables away, speaking to someone distractedly, but his gaze was still on her. Not a polite glance, not a businessman's curiosity. Something else, something that made her forget the noise, the whispers, and the ache of old wounds. He smiled faintly, almost imperceptibly, the kind of smile that promised disruption. Elena didn't know it yet, but that single glance would rewrite everything she thought she'd left behind. The orchestra's soft strings filled the ballroom, but the laughter that had mocked her earlier now came in uneasy fragments. Dinner had begun. Crystal clinks, murmured conversations, and the faint hum of 100 polished pretenses. Elena Hayes sat alone at the farthest corner table, her plate untouched, her eyes fixed on the rim of her glass. She could feel the stares. They clung to her like static, invisible but burning. Across the room, Adrian Blackwell's arrival had changed everything. He was the kind of man who didn't blend into crowds. He commanded them. And though people surrounded him with smiles that bordered on worship, his gaze kept drifting, always back to her. Elena told herself it was coincidence. Perhaps he didn't even remember her. Why would he? That brief encounter years ago, a cafe, a misunderstanding, a stranger she defended, was nothing more than a flicker in her past. Yet the memory of it haunted her now. As the waiters moved between tables, whispers began to ripple again. She's really sitting alone. Does she think he'll notice her? Poor thing. Each comment landed like a drop of poison, slow and precise. Elena straightened her back, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing her discomfort. Then silence, it began subtly. The clinking stopped. Forks hovered mid-air. The waiter froze mid-step. She felt the change before she saw it. An energy shift that made the hairs on her arms rise. Adrian Blackwell was walking toward her. Every step he took echoed louder than the music. Conversations died in his wake. Men turned their heads. Women's eyes narrowed with curiosity and envy. He didn't hesitate, didn't glance at anyone else, didn't pretend this was casual. His intent was as deliberate as it was mysterious. Elena's heart stuttered. He can't be coming here, but he was. He stopped right beside her table. The world seemed to contract around them. Hundreds of eyes, 1,000 unspoken questions. He leaned down, close enough for her to smell the faint trace of his cologne. Clean, expensive, unsettlingly intimate. "You're mine tonight," he said. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. His tone was quiet, even tender, but it sliced through the room like a blade. Nearby guests heard it. Forks froze mid-air. One woman gasped. Elena forgot how to breathe. The air felt thicker now, every heartbeat magnified. She stared at him, stunned, unsure whether to laugh or leave. Around them, murmurs grew into waves of disbelief. "Why her?" they whispered. Of all women, why her? Adrian straightened slowly, unbothered by the chaos he'd just caused. His expression was unreadable, calm, confident, and dangerous in its restraint. For a moment, he looked like a man who'd merely made a business deal. But the flicker in his eyes said otherwise. He offered his hand. "Dance with me." The command was polite, but there was no mistaking it for a request. Elena hesitated. Every instinct screamed to refuse, to walk out and leave the whispers behind. Yet something deeper held her there. That same inexplicable pull she'd felt years ago in that cafe, when she'd seen him cornered by angry investors, accused of deception, and she, without knowing who he was, had spoken up for him. That day had changed his course. Now it seemed he intended to change hers. She placed her hand in his. The room parted as they stepped onto the dance floor. The band, unsure, faltered before regaining rhythm. Soft jazz swelled around them. He guided her with a precision that felt rehearsed, but his touch was firm, protective. The eyes watching them blurred into insignificance. For the first time that evening, Elena forgot about being the outsider. "You shouldn't have said that," she whispered as they turned slowly under the lights. Said what? His voice brushed her ear. That I'm yours. Would you rather I let them keep laughing? Her reply caught in her throat. His hand pressed gently against her back, guiding her through the next turn. The contact sent a pulse of warmth through her, unwelcome but impossible to ignore. You don't even know me, she murmured. A small smile ghosted his lips. That's where you're wrong. Each step became a conversation of its own, his confidence against her hesitation, his mystery against her need for control. Guests tried to continue eating, pretending to ignore them, but every glance betrayed fascination. The woman they mocked was now dancing with the man who could buy half the city, and he looked like he'd burn the other half for her. When the music slowed, Adrian didn't release her hand immediately. He looked down at her, expression softening in a way that disarmed her completely. Why now? She finally asked. He studied her face for a moment, as though searching for the right version of the truth. Because some things don't fade, no matter how long you try to forget them. She wanted to ask what he meant, but his gaze, dark, unwavering, silenced her. Around them the ballroom pulsed with unspoken intrigue. Everyone had seen. Everyone would talk. But in that suspended moment, Elena realized that whatever had just begun between them was beyond gossip, beyond logic, and dangerously beyond her control. And Adrian Blackwell, whatever his reasons, had just made sure the entire city would remember her name again. The wedding had ended hours ago, but the echo of whispers still clung to Elena like perfume she couldn't wash off. Outside, rain shimmered against the city lights, soft at first, then heavy enough to blur the edges of everything. She stepped out of the hotel's grand doorway, holding her small clutch close, intending to disappear into the wet silence before the night could claim another rumor about her. A black car rolled to a stop in front of her. The window lowered, and Adrian Blackwell leaned slightly toward her, his eyes a contrast of calm and intensity. "You shouldn't walk alone in this weather," he said quietly. Elena hesitated, the rain already soaking through the thin silk of her dress. "You've caused enough attention for one night, Mr. Blackwell," she replied, voice steady but brittle. He smiled faintly. "Then one more minute won't make a difference." Something in his tone, half challenge, half concern, made her pause. Against her better judgment, she opened the door and slid into the car. The city outside moved like a watercolor painting, blurred, dreamlike. Inside, silence settled between them, thick with unspoken things. Adrian's driver steered smoothly through the wet streets, leaving the storm behind them. Elena folded her hands in her lap, staring out the window. "Was that your idea of saving me? Announcing to a ballroom full of people that I belong to you?" His jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "You think that was about possession? What else could it be?" He leaned back, studying her profile. "Do you really believe I'd risk my reputation to embarrass you?" She turned to face him. "I don't know what to believe." For a long moment he said nothing. The only sound was the rhythmic patter of rain against the glass. Then, almost to himself, he murmured, "I thought you deserved to know the truth." Elena's breath caught. "The truth?" He looked out at the rain-smeared streets before speaking again. "Your ex's family, the same people who destroyed your name, tried to destroy me too. 2 years ago, they nearly brought my company down with fabricated evidence, hidden partnerships, and false accounts. You were a convenient distraction for them, a scapegoat with a soft voice and a kind heart." Her pulse quickened. "That's not possible. They used your engagement to shield what they were doing. When I started investigating their contracts, they made sure the scandal hit you first. The timing wasn't coincidence, Elena. It was a cover." She stared at him, the storm outside reflected in her eyes. "You're saying I was used to protect their crimes?" "Yes," he said, voice low but certain. "And when I realized it, it was already too late. You disappeared from every headline, vanished from every event. You built a life outside their reach. I didn't interfere until tonight." Elena turned away, her throat tightening. The weight of it all pressed against her ribs. For years she had carried shame that wasn't hers, hate she didn't earn. Now it all cracked open at once, leaving confusion where anger should have been. "Then why tonight?" she asked quietly. "Why come back into my life this way?" He looked at her for a long time, his gaze unreadable but softening at the edges. Because they were there. Because they still whisper your name like a curse, and I couldn't watch it happen again. Not when I could stop it. His words hung in the air like thunder. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to let relief wash over her, but part of her still flinched. Trust didn't rebuild in one confession. You think that makes everything right? She asked. No, he said simply. But maybe it's a start. Lightning streaked across the sky, throwing flashes of light into the car. In that moment, she saw something raw in his eyes, something that looked nothing like business or strategy. He leaned forward slightly. I watched you rebuild everything they tried to take from you. The way you carried yourself, the quiet dignity. I thought I was done feeling anything for anyone. But then there you were, living proof that not everything they ruin stays broken. The car slowed to a stop near her apartment. The storm had softened into a steady drizzle. Neither moved. Elena turned toward him, searching for deceit, but finding only exhaustion and honesty tangled together. You're telling me all this now because... What, you want to be forgiven? He shook his head. I want you to stop hiding from a world that doesn't deserve your silence. Her heart twisted. You think you can fix that with one night? I think I can start, he said quietly, eyes holding hers. For a long moment she didn't respond. The driver looked away politely, as the two sat in the hush of fading rain. Finally she opened the door, letting the cold air rush in. As she stepped out, Adrian's voice followed softly. Elena! She turned, framed by the glow of the streetlight. I meant what I said, he continued. You were never mine to claim, but you're not theirs to destroy either. She closed the door gently, her reflection ghosted in the tinted glass. The car pulled away, leaving her alone with the rain and the faint tremor of something new, something she couldn't yet name. And as she walked toward her building, she realized that every look, every whisper, every secret that began in that ballroom had only been the beginning of something far more dangerous. The morning after the wedding, Elena's world changed again, this time without her consent. Her phone vibrated non-stop. The screen flashed with news alerts, messages, and calls she refused to answer. Every outlet in the city had the same headline: Billionaire CEO declares his claim at society wedding. There were photos too, grainy but unmistakable. Adrian leaning close to whisper something, her stunned expression, his hand guiding her onto the dance floor. The internet devoured the story, twisting it into every possible angle. Some called it romance, others called it scandal. Elena stayed in her small apartment above the bookstore she'd built from nothing. The shop below had always been her sanctuary, walls lined with stories that asked for nothing but time and quiet. Now it felt exposed, like even the pages could hear the city laughing again. By afternoon the whispers had become headlines. Mystery woman from Blackwell's past. Cinderella or corporate porn. She turned the TV off, shut her phone and sat in silence, the steady hum of rain outside reminding her of the night before. When the shop bell finally rang, she didn't look up right away. We're closed, she said softly. Then I'll wait, came the reply. She froze. She would know that voice anywhere. Adrian stood in the doorway. No entourage, no bodyguards, no immaculate arrogance. Just a man in a dark coat, shoulders wet from the rain. He looked tired, as though the weight of 100 boardrooms couldn't compare to this one small moment. I told you not to come here, she said, keeping her voice level. I know, he replied, but you've had everyone else talking for you. I thought maybe I should at least say something myself. Elena turned, eyes sharp with exhaustion. You've already said enough. The entire city thinks I'm your latest scandal. He nodded slowly. That's fair. Fair. She laughed softly, bitterly. You call what you did fair? He took a hesitant step closer, then stopped, keeping a careful distance. I didn't come to defend myself. I came because I needed you to hear it from me, not from headlines. Her silence pressed him to continue. You were never mine to claim, he said finally. His voice wasn't rehearsed this time. It was quiet, rough around the edges. But I wish you'd choose to be. For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, the rain hit the windows in gentle rhythm, as if the world itself waited for her answer. Elena's hands trembled slightly as she crossed her arms, Not from fear, but from the storm of feeling she refused to let win. "You think saying that makes everything better?" "Nub," he said, "but it's the truth." He glanced around the bookstore, the worn shelves, the neatly arranged stacks, the handwritten tags in her looping script. "You built this," he murmured. "They took everything from you, and you built something beautiful anyway. I only wanted to protect it, protect you." She looked at him then, really looked at him, the man everyone called untouchable, now standing drenched and uncertain in her quiet little world. And for the first time she saw the cracks in his control. Not power, not possession, but remorse. "You don't need to protect me," she said softly. "I've been doing that alone for years." He nodded, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "I know. That's what I admire most." The words hung between them, honest, unadorned, and real. When he left, he didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said, "I'll see you around, Miss Hayes," and disappeared into the rain. Days turned to weeks. The noise faded. Headlines shifted to new scandals, new names. Her bookstore became busy again, not with people curious about her past, but with customers drawn by the calm she offered. She learned to breathe again quietly, steadily. Months later, another wedding invitation arrived, ironic, almost cruel. But this time, when Elena entered the grand hall, she didn't walk alone. Adrian was beside her, not as a claim or a shield, but as a partner. His hand brushed hers gently as they walked, and the crowd, those same polished faces that once laughed, fell into silence. Not mocking this time, not cruel. Just quiet, watching. The same orchestra played, the same chandeliers glowed, but the story had changed. She no longer needed to prove herself. He no longer needed to hide behind power. They were equals, two people who had faced the same world and chosen each other in spite of it. When the music rose and they stepped onto the dance floor again, someone began to clap softly. Then others joined until the hall filled with applause. Elena smiled, not the polite kind, but the kind that came from somewhere deep, from years of breaking and rebuilding. The laughter that once haunted her was gone. In its place was recognition, respect, and the quiet, undeniable rhythm of love that had found its way through ruin and rain to begin again.